In 1999, a mysterious disappearance occurred in the U.S. that still puzzles people to this day. An 11-year-old girl was left alone for 90 seconds and literally vanished without a trace. Years later, the police would find a banknote with the words, "I'm alive," written in the girl's name. In this video, we have gathered all the available information on what happened to Mikel Biggs. Friends, before we begin, I would like to ask you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. By doing so, you will greatly help in growing the channel so we can create more quality content for you. On January 2nd, 1999, in the American city of Mesa, Arizona, two sisters, 11-year-old Mikelle and 9-year-old Kimber, were playing near their home. It was a chilly evening, and it was just starting to get dark outside. Despite it being midwinter, Arizona is a warm southern state, so Mikelle took her bike and was riding near her sister. At one point, the girls thought they heard the sound of an approaching ice cream truck. These trucks are equipped with speakers and play music to alert children to their arrival with their favorite treat. Mikelle rushed home to ask her mom for some change to buy ice cream, then returned to the street. However, the ice cream truck was nowhere to be seen, so the girls waited. At some point, Kimber began to feel cold. She told her sister that she would run inside to grab a jacket and come right back. When she returned, Mikelle was no longer there. Her bike was lying on the road, and its wheel was still spinning. Nearby were 2 coins that Mikelle had prepared to buy ice cream. Kimber went back home and told their mother that Mikelle was missing. At this point, neither Kimber nor their mother considered that something terrible might have happened. The mother thought Mikelle might have gone to visit their neighbors, with whom the family had a friendly relationship. However, Mikelle wasn't there, and the mother realized that something terrible might have happened to her daughter. She immediately contacted the police. It's worth noting that the police responded very quickly. Within 30 minutes, a helicopter was in the air. Law enforcement stopped all suspicious vehicles and canvassed the surrounding houses. On that day, volunteers from the girls' school handed out and posted flyers with her photograph. Later, these images would appear in shop windows and on billboards along roads throughout Arizona. The police searched dumpsters and inspected hundreds of homes. The case was assigned to detectives Butch Gates and Jerry Gessel. The officers questioned every ice cream vendor in the state, but were unable to determine that any of them had been in the area at the time of the girl's disappearance. The detectives reconstructed the timeline of events and came to a chilling conclusion. The girl disappeared in just 90 seconds. That was the length of Kimber's absence. The spinning wheel on the bicycle confirmed that the abduction happened extremely quickly. The search dogs, which were brought in to assist the investigation, couldn't pick up the girl's trail at first. And when they finally did, they only took a few steps toward the road. The fact is that dogs only pick up a person's scent if that person has left on foot. This only reinforced the police's main theory. The girl was taken into a vehicle and driven away, all within seconds. The situation was made more difficult by the complete lack of witnesses. Despite the fact that the girls were playing on a street lined with houses, none of the neighbors saw them that evening. Later, information emerged that a man had attempted to abduct 2 girls directly from a school. At that time, the children were 10 and 11 years old. The police investigated whether there was any connection to Mikel's disappearance. She was also 11. But the attempted abduction turned out to be a failed prank. As the leads dwindled, the police began working through standard theories. In cases of a missing child, Parents and other relatives are always investigated. Given that Mikel's mother was at home during the abduction, investigators focused on the girl's father, Dee Biggs. From the start, no one truly believed he was involved. Why would a father abduct his own daughter, especially in such a manner, in the middle of the street in a short span of time, when his other daughter ran home? However, it soon came to light that the man had lied about his alibi. During the first interrogation, he claimed to have been at work at the time of Mikel's abduction. This turned out to be untrue. In reality, he was spending time with his lover. And it gets even more interesting. The man failed the polygraph test during interrogation. His wife admitted that she knew about the affairs. Darian had told her about them a month before. The incident. The couple was considering divorce. Despite his false alibi, the police eventually stopped viewing the father as a suspect. Even in the event of a divorce, his wife had no plans to prevent him from seeing the children. He simply had no motive. Moreover, the detectives acknowledged that the polygraph results could have been influenced by the father's emotional state, as his daughter had just been abducted. It's possible he even blamed himself to some extent, thinking that had he been home with the family, the tragedy could have been avoided. The detectives also traced Darian's movements that evening and determined that he simply wouldn't have had time to hide the body. The man returned home very quickly after his wife called to inform him of their daughter's disappearance. Detective Hessel later stated that it was highly unlikely Mikel knew her abductor. If it had been her father, she wouldn't have dropped her bike and the coins on the ground. The girl tried to run away from a stranger, but simply couldn't make it in time. During the investigation, the police regularly received leads, but they all went nowhere. An anonymous man called the detectives and claimed that Mikel's body was located on the grounds of an abandoned factory in the outskirts of the city. The police combed the area but found nothing. Later, they received an email from an anonymous person who claimed to be the one who had kidnapped the girl. The FBI quickly traced the sender's IP address and sent a SWAT team to his home in Phoenix. It turned out that the sender was a 12-year-old boy who had decided to play a prank. Meanwhile, the police hit a dead end, resorting to even the most far-fetched theories. They searched 35 abandoned gold mines in the county and even interviewed nearly 500 psychics who supposedly could assist the investigation. Of course, this led nowhere. One witness came forward, stating they had seen a copper-colored Jeep shortly before Mikel's abduction. The driver was quickly found and turned out to be innocent. After this, the police had almost given up hope of finding the girl, as there were literally no leads left. This continued until September 27, 1999, when the quiet county was shaken by another shocking event. A woman who lived near the Biggs family returned home and went into her kitchen, where she saw a middle-aged man with his pants unbuttoned. He didn't say a word, but instead attacked the woman, choking and assaulting her. After the attack, the perpetrator set the house on fire and left. It seemed the attacker thought his victim was dead, but the woman survived. Her neck was broken, but she managed to reach the phone and call an ambulance. On the way to the hospital, with her last bit of strength, she whispered to the medics, "Mikel Biggs, the girl who disappeared. He took her. You have to save her." The entire town was in an uproar once again, and events quickly escalated. The police immediately took action and arrested the attacker, identified as Dee Blalock. He was a well-known local alcoholic who lived with his wife and 3 children, repaired broken cars, and occasionally caused public disturbances. His house was only 2 blocks away from the Biggs residence. Dee was one of the first to volunteer to help search for Mikelle and willingly allowed the police to search his home. But not the trailer in the backyard. For the trailer, he demanded a warrant. You have to admit, such behavior is extremely suspicious. A man with a bad reputation volunteers to help find a missing girl, lets the police search his house without any questions, and suddenly forbids them from looking inside the trailer. Since then, Blalock became the main suspect, despite his wife providing an alibi for him at the time of Mikelle's disappearance. No one believed her story. Most likely, she was simply afraid of her husband. Detectives began digging into Blalock's past and discovered that he had been convicted 3 times for violence, harassment, and kidnapping minors. He had only been released from prison in 1995, and at that time, none of the neighbors had any idea that a monster had moved in next door. Several times a week, Mikelle attended private piano lessons with a neighbor who lived across the street from Blalock's house. This suggested that the man could have known the girl long before her disappearance. After Blalock was arrested for assaulting a woman, the police returned to search his property, planning to examine the trailer he had previously refused to let them see. However, they were met with disappointment. The trailer had disappeared without a trace. For Mikelle's parents, it was a devastating blow. They were certain their daughter was there, alive or not. But the trailer disappeared, and the police were unable to track it down. On September 27, 1999, Blalock was sentenced to 15.5 years in prison for assaulting a woman. He categorically denied any involvement in Mikelle's disappearance. No surprises there. For the assault on his neighbor and the horrific acts he committed against her, a 15-year sentence could be considered lenient by U.S. standards. Admitting to kidnapping an 11-year-old girl, on the other hand, could have sent him straight to the electric chair. The parents couldn't come to terms with the fact that their only hope for the truth had vanished. Mikelle's mother and father wrote a letter to Blalock in prison, asking him the most important question. Was he involved in Mikelle's disappearance? No one expected a confession, but the criminal's response took the parents by surprise. He wrote that the matter was too personal to discuss in a letter and suggested they visit him in prison. At that moment, the parents' hearts filled with hope that Blalock might confess. But what awaited them was a huge disappointment. Sitting across from the criminal, the father asked if he had anything to do with his daughter's disappearance. Blalock simply replied that he didn't. The conversation continued in this manner for a few more minutes, after which the criminal just stood up and left, escorted by the guards. It all seemed as though he was merely toying with the parents, giving them false hope only to crush it while looking them in the eyes. For a sadist like Blalock, the suffering of others could bring unmatched pleasure. This, apparently, was the reason he arranged the meeting with the grieving parents. Afterward, Mikel's father admitted that he was convinced of Blalock's guilt. He said, "I was sitting just a few feet away from the man who killed my daughter, and there was nothing I could do about it." At this point, even the most resilient had lost hope in solving the case. Everyone believed that no new leads would ever surface. Years later, they would realize they were wrong. But more on that later. On the 5th anniversary of Mikel's disappearance, her parents buried an empty coffin, finally saying goodbye to their daughter. In that time, their marriage fell apart. They moved, and they were reluctant to speak with journalists. Until 2018, the case had been shelved for a long time. The police simply had nothing to work with. But unexpectedly, something happened that shook the entire nation. On March 14, 2018, a dollar bill accidentally made its way to the police station in Neenah, Wisconsin. Scrawled on it in messy handwriting were the words, "My name is Mikel Biggs. Kidnapped from Mesa. I am alive." The bill was found by a local resident who had been collecting coins and dollar bills in a jar. He was the one who came across this dollar and reported it to the police. The authorities immediately reopened the investigation. Mikel's mother rushed nearly 2,000 miles to look at the handwriting and determine if the message had truly been written by her daughter. Other family members also came to the station, but they all made a disappointing statement. The handwriting didn't resemble Mikel's at all, and her name was misspelled. Mikel's mother speculated that the bill could be someone's cruel, misguided prank. The rest of the family agreed with this theory. Despite that, the police attempted to trace the bill's origin. Unfortunately, tracking it was nearly impossible. Paper money changes hands so many times that finding the author of this inscription was impossible. Experts who studied the bill suggested that the writing was done by an adult man attempting to mimic a child's handwriting. Despite everything, the message on the bill seems highly suspicious. Could this have been someone's prank? The chances of the bill being noticed by the police or the family were extremely slim. It could have passed from hand to hand for years or ended up in a bank vault without anyone paying attention to it. The fact that it reached someone who cared enough to report it to the police is more of a miracle than an inevitability. As for the handwriting, the most obvious theory can't be ruled out. Mikel might have written in haste, fearing being caught. After all, she disappeared 9 years before the bill was discovered. If we assume someone held her captive, did they allow her to write anything during that time? Over 9 years without practice, her handwriting could have changed beyond recognition. There's also another question no one knows the answer to. How long ago was this inscription made? The bill could have been in circulation for years, or it could have appeared shortly before being found. We should also remember about Blalock, who was supposed to be released from prison in 2017. Perhaps this was a cruel prank of his. It's enough to recall how he tormented the unfortunate parents, giving them false hope. We may never find answers to all these questions, or this case might once again shock the world with unexpected details. Kimber, who was the last to see her older sister before the abduction, still cannot forget that terrifying January evening. For a long time, she blamed herself for going home to get a jacket, but now she understands that against an adult abductor, she would have been helpless. Kimber is now raising a young son, to whom she often talks about his Aunt Mikelle. She calls her an angel watching over him. Like the rest of her family, Kimber is convinced that Mikelle was abducted by Bala. But without evidence, this will never be proven unless the criminal himself decides to confess, inflicting another blow on the missing girl's family.